Do you feel guilty about your eating? Maybe when you eat, or what you eat, or even how you eat? Perhaps it's more about shame, feeling ashamed about a situation or a relationship or something that has happened in your life. In this video, let's explore the differences between guilt and shame and the situations in which you may be feeling these. And most importantly, look at some tools and techniques that you can use to manage these emotions in a better and healthier way moving forward. Let's start by considering the difference between guilt and shame and whether this actually holds true for you. Generally, it's said that guilt is the feeling that is aroused by you actually having done something wrong. So, for example, if you shout at somebody, then you can feel guilty for having shouted at them. Whereas shame tends to be more about your sense of identity itself, a feeling of, I am a bad person because I always shout. So it's not about one particular event, it's more about what you feel to represent yourself as a person, your whole identity. And that's kind of the difference between guilt and shame. I say kind of, because I think that one trait which is found very often in those of us who emotionally eat is perfectionism, a set of beliefs around how we should be. And that will often mean that we convert things that we feel guilty about, things that we have actually done that perhaps aren't the nicest or best things that we could do, and we turn them into, I am a horrible person, I don't deserve anything. So there's very often a case that you may be turning guilt into shame because of these perfectionistic traits, which are found so often in those of us who have issues around emotional eating. It's also very possible to feel guilty or ashamed, not just about things that we do or don't do in our lives or situations that happen to us or with us. We can also feel guilty or ashamed about our emotions and about having these emotions. I should be a good person. I shouldn't ever get angry. I should be a cheerful, positive person. I shouldn't feel sad about things, especially if there's no real reason to feel sad about it. And yet, the fact of the matter is that all of these emotions that we've been discussing in this series on emotional eating are valid emotions. They are all part of the human experience. And yet, so often, we, perhaps especially as women, get accused of being overly emotional and feel like we shouldn't have these emotions. And that can then be converted into, I'm a terrible person because I have these emotions. So we're getting that shame around even having emotions. And of course, another big source of guilt or shame can be our emotional eating itself, feeling guilty that we're not able to control it, feeling guilty for what we've eaten and how we've eaten it and when we've eaten it and where we've eaten it. We can feel guilty about so many things. And that's really not a good situation to be in because obviously feeling guilty spikes your stress, which we've already seen is one of the primary motivators for emotional eating. So the more you feel guilty about emotional eating, the more likely you are to emotionally eat. However, we can break free of this vicious cycle by using some of the tools that I've already talked about in these series. And let's focus in on those tools you could use specifically around guilt and shame. One of those would be to do some havening on emotions, situations, relationships in which you have felt guilty or ashamed. And this can be very deep, profound work. I often encourage people to actually use a therapist to stand alongside you for something like this, as it can be very powerful work that really taps into big emotions. For example, survivors of trauma often feel a lot of guilt and shame about having been in a traumatic situation, which was completely not your fault, and nevertheless those feelings persist. So that's the kind of situation where I would highly recommend actually speaking with a therapist, because it can be so helpful and supportive to have someone by your side. It can also be really great in those situations to, for example, join a group of fellow survivors so that you can really see that you're not alone in this. There are others who've been through this too, and that it's okay to have had these experiences and to have these emotions. There is also a lot that you can do for yourself in these situations, and you may feel comfortable doing that. I even have a video up on my website where I talk you through an actual havening meditation, which you could use for yourself if you are clear on what memory it is that is connected with this guilt or shame that you would like to work on and snap out of or shift and transform. So, havening on the memory of a situation or a relationship or whatever it might be around guilt and shame can be a really profoundly transformative experience. And once you have released that memory, released those emotions, they're gone. And so the guilt and the shame just drain away, and you're no longer triggered into them either. It can therefore be a very good thing to do in order to help you really change your relationship with food. At a simpler level, there are also some things that you can do very easily for yourself to help yourself in this. I've spoken about other breathing techniques that can be supportive in different situations. And one that I also like is box breathing. It's where you breathe in on one count, hold your breath, perhaps for the same count, breathe out on that same count, and then hold the breath again on that same count. Now, you can have a rectangular box rather than a square box if you prefer, so to speak. So you could breathe in on 4, hold for 2, breathe out for 4, hold for 2. You could breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. There are a lot of different ways that you can play with this. So see what you find helpful for you. It's a very good one for balancing up your mental space and coming to a greater sense of calm, which is a much better and healthier place from which to approach these feelings of guilt and shame. Another way of managing these emotions is once again tapping. You could tap and just describe how it feels to feel guilty. Or you could tap and talk about the situation that you feel guilty about. You could also tap on different parts, the part of you that feels guilty about doing something, and the part of you that feels that you need to do that something to help yourself to cope. And all of these would be good, useful strategies that will help you to calm that level of emotion and to come to a more creative place where perhaps you can take a little moment to reflect, to notice that perhaps you don't need to feel ashamed about it, even if it is something you are guilty of having done. That doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. You can still be deserving of love, deserving of joy, deserving of a happy life, even if you haven't always been totally perfect. So, these are all great ways of approaching guilt and shame to start to loosen their hold and let them go. And if you do think that more support would be helpful, please feel free to get in touch with me or any therapist, or even just talk with a friend or join a support group. Do something for yourself to help you in this situation. If you haven't already seen all of the other videos in this series where I explore the emotions that are most commonly linked to emotional eating, I encourage you to take a look at them, partly because you may be feeling guilty about some of those emotions, and partly to get clearer about which, if any, or perhaps all of them, are things that have you reaching for food. And I also offer a mini course to help quiet the food noise, my top 3 tips so that you can make food cravings a thing of the past.